Can I start by saying welcome and importantly, if you are currently in northern New South Wales or Queensland and you're impacted by the cyclone, please stay safe, and we do sincerely hope your business gets through as best it can pretty challenging times. Today, as we said, is about reflection, a little bit more than education, and in planning for today we thought we'd kind of run through sort of 4 bits. Have a quick chat, sort of the overview, and we've got an election coming, although at the moment
it's uncertain.
Uncertain
what's
when.
going to happen. And I think when we put this in the calendar, we're quietly confident that we would know exactly what was happening right now and be able to talk about what was going to happen. It's less certain now, weather events and so forth. I don't mind that at all, though, for this reason. I think it is a moment of reflection, and it is a time for pausing to think about all the stuff that's happened, where it actually is, what we've seen, what people we speak to have seen, before the circus begins in terms of an election, where, as you mentioned to me in opening, it becomes binary once the election begins.
Yeah, it does. We good, you bad.
Today is not about binary.
Binary is not about binary. So we just want to have a bit of an overview, chat about the election, and then we're going to sort of go through 3 boxes, if we can use that description. I want to talk a little bit about things employers probably have done differently in the last 18 months. We really do want to talk then about what we've experienced and what we've learnt, and there'll be quite a bit on that. And then there is so much in the works that's still coming through. We want to have a chat about where things are up to in terms of what's in the works, and in particular how it may impact you either directly or indirectly. So that's kind of roughly how we want to go. So let's just maybe start with some sort of overview and a little bit of the election. Now I posed these questions because I wanted to be marginally provocative.
Yep.
Is there more happening now than before all of the ALP's legislative changes over effectively the last 18 months to 24 months? Do you think there is?
I think I can hear HR, IR managers screaming at me through the cameras. Of course there is. It's been the busiest 3, 4, whatever years of people's lives. My view is absolutely yes. There is much happening. A lot of the changes, remember, are not necessarily even designed or don't even profess to simplify. A lot of the changes are vehicles, tools, things, mechanisms, avenues for people to use.
In other words, we've got a lot more employees, got a lot more rights now, unions got a lot more rights, and they're starting to play with them.
The Fair Work Commission have a lot more obligations, a lot more roles.
A lot more staff.
A lot more staff, a lot more members. Absolutely. I think more is happening now than before the legislation changed. That's not a judgment call, it's just counting.
The other thing I think is important for people to be cognizant of is something that's probably parallel to the legislation. And we've talked about this over the last 12 months in particular, particularly in bargaining. Yep. And some related areas. We've seen a renewed confidence in the union movement, both in terms of its activities in the Fair Work Commission. So there seems to be a lot more, as you put it, applications going in, but also particularly out in the field. It's almost a bit like one union official said to me last year, "Nigel, this is our time." So there is both direct impact in terms of activity, but there's also this sort of renewed confidence in the union movement, and we've seen that come through, particularly with the behaviours of certain unions, particularly in bargaining, which have become, shall we say, slightly more aggressive, slightly more antagonistic than they might have historically been. So you are right. If you have the word HR on your title or the word I on the title, you probably had an exceptionally busy end to last year, and you're probably getting ready for a very busy year this year. Is business on the defensive?
Well, I mean, certainly in some aspects. In your description of the mood in the union movement, I think you mentioned aggression or confidence. I mean, in some senses, a confident union movement or a confident union activity in your workplace, let's say something like, I don't know, delegates' rights,
which we'll come to.
Which we'll come to. There's no reason that a business necessarily needs to respond defensively to the valid exercise of rights or union activities done in a reasonable way. I think, particularly probably in the bargaining space, there is some strategic decisions and movements that businesses needed to take to try and play the game with the rules such as they are now.
And play the game better.
Correct. Correct.
It's interesting because last year a number of people said to me for the first time, I think it's not an easy country to do business in, and I think there was this kind of pervasive doom that hit, probably in some senses because there was so much legislative change in one go. But you're right, I think what we're seeing is people perhaps are realising they need to be better prepared in certain areas, they need to be proactive in certain areas. So there might be this sense of defensiveness, but it doesn't need to play out that way if you're well resourced and well structured in your business and you're thinking about the right things, which hopefully today is really about, are you thinking about the right things?
Absolutely. With all the change comes opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's not a glib platitude just to get away from doom and gloom. That's factually and that's literally what we've seen. People taking the opportunities, understanding the new rules to play the game in a way that will present a benefit to them.
Optimise their options as a business. And which brings us to the election. We'll just finish this, then we'll get onto what I'm going to call the real stuff. But I always think when we talk about politics, you and I are the worst people put in the room together.
Well, at least to talk to a live audience
about it. Live audience about politics. Labor wins. My sense is if the ALP win the next election, and a lot of people are talking about possibly minority government, my real sense is they're probably largely done in this space. I suspect there might be some tinkering. There'll be the odd, we didn't think that would work that way. We might need to fix that test up or whatever. But my real sense is if the ALP win the next election, you won't be hit with another avalanche of changes. I think they're largely done. Is that a...
Yeah, look, pure speculation. I would think it would be very, very unlikely.
My friends in the union movement tell me that that's probably the case.
I think it would be very unlikely, if not impossible, for another Labor government to hit the ground running and get through the extraordinary amount of stuff that they did. Obviously, a lot of that stuff had been built up over many years, various test cases and so forth. I don't think they have as much in the chamber anymore to deploy.
Coalition win the election.
That's the more interesting question.
That's the more interesting one. And, I think the question, and we posed this question recently when we were at a lunch together to a minister, is the coalition still suffering from the ghost of work choices? I suspect the answer is it would like to say no, but it possibly, deep down in its soul, is still somewhat sensitive about that in terms of how it played out in the media. The real problem, I think, if the coalition win, is simply what's the constitution of the Senate.
They'll need the numbers. So if you are sitting out there hoping that the coalition win and all of this is going to go away, I think you really have to be fairly realistic. They've clearly got some areas they want to move on if they do take government. But the idea that somebody said to me the other day, they're going to repeal it, I just don't see how they're going to get the numbers in the upper house to do that, unless something very, very strange happens in the Australian electorate. So, as I've often said, you play the game that's in front of you and you play it as well as you can. But we'll obviously have an election soon, at some point. Whether or not it's before or after my birthday. Oh, that's an important thing. After all.
More important than anything else.
Yeah.
More important than anything else. Well, so perhaps we might start with what employers are doing differently. And I'll let you hit the first three, and I might just make a couple of observations about the second three. Big changes with casual employment. So, like a 1 minute explainer, how would you explain the changes very, very quickly? And then we'll talk about whether or not we've actually seen anything, because there's been a lot of focus on this in the media.
Huge amount of focus. The casual changes, and we've talked about the casual changes on and on and on and on and on. We have a new definition. The definition of casual employment changed. It changed, in fairness, to probably a more vague version. The contract is no longer king or queen. The question about whether you're casual, do you have a firm advance commitment of continuing ongoing work? Two people can disagree on that. The definition changed. probably more relevant and interesting to people on the other side of the camera is that the casual conversion process also changed.
It flipped.
It flipped. Instead of becoming an onus on the employer to essentially audit records
And offer.
So you audit, then you offer anyone who might be in the red zone of not being a casual anymore. It has now flipped, at least for non-small employers, to an employee choice model, whereby an employee who considers themselves to no longer be a casual employee can ask the employer, can I convert to permanent? The employer, they have to respond within 21 days. If they have reasonable operational grounds as to refuse, and a few other exceptions of how you can refuse. That has been a godsend. A lot of relieved,
I was wondering if you're going to be heretic.
A lot of relieved employers are telling me that it's an amazing amount of admin that they don't have to do, that they no longer, if for the non-small employers, they no longer have to provide the offer anymore. This changes the game. The overarching lens to all of this, and this is one of your favourites, Nigel, is that for the most part, we have not seen, and I don't think you have seen either, casual employees desperately wanting to become permanent employees.
No.
Because the conversation's always the same. I'm a casual employee, I'm thinking about permanent employment. Okay. If you want a permanent employment, you will no longer get your 25% loading.
But you will get sick leave and other benefits.
Correct. Your rosters might be more structured. Maybe you can't, go to Japan for skiing over the whatever the university break or whatever it might be. We're hearing a lot about employers having those conversations with their employees, and the employees saying, I'll just say casual. It's easier. Yeah. It's fine.
And I think it's interesting. There was sort of a lot of hoo-ha about this when it all came out. I think you're right. Most of the people we're dealing with every day have said the idea of them having to come to me and say I'd like it has made my life a lot easier than having to offer it. And the fact of the matter is, most of the people we're talking to have not been inundated by requests to change, and we've not seen lots of disputes about who is a casual or isn't a casual. It's disturbingly settled very quickly, in my view.
One of the reasons why I think it is settled is because at least this has been put on the agenda. So employers are quite conscious of the fact that they want to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Forgetting the casual conversion obligations, they're talking to long-term casuals about their engagement, and most of the time that conversation is, I'm cool with casual, so let's keep it going.
Now, fixed-term employment, all the rules got thrown up in the air and changed, and we've been spending an inordinate amount of time with particular sectors, some of our big clients in the education area, where fixed-term employment was a very, very strong practice.
Yep.
I would say, if you'd asked me this question 5 years ago, I'd have said some of that practice was perhaps, I'm not going to use the word lazy, but they just got habit had formed about...
Or addicted to it.
Addicted to rolling you over, contract after contract after contract. Again, quick explainer, and what have you seen?
So the quick explainer on fixed-term employment is that the recent legislative changes brought in a lot of restrictions about how you can provide and offer fixed-term employment. So prohibitions on, and there's plenty of exemptions to all of these, prohibitions on contracts over 2 years, prohibitions on having multiple renewal parts of the contract, prohibitions on stacking contracts one after the other. There is then a long list of exemptions where there are industries or maybe high-income employees, specialised tasks, a very, very long list where those restrictions don't apply. Over the top of all of that is the idea of a modern award deals with the subject matter in a particular way, let's say in higher education.
Higher education would be an important one.
Places where sessional employment is really well established, then those things, the complex legislation doesn't necessarily apply.
It yields to the award
It yields to the awards.
Now, it's slightly more complex than that, but I think for today that'll
I was
do.
just about to say that sounds very complex, and Nigel said it sounds even more complex than how I've just explained it.
Right.
It's extremely complicated. I think from the client side, what we have seen is good faith people who are usually in industries who require this type of employment model needing to lawyer up, so to speak, to find out what the...
Actually reviewing all of their arrangements. The last 18 months, we had people reviewing their arrangements with us. We've been saying, look, that one's fine, all good. That one maybe isn't. Let's talk about what we're going to do there. And I think that's part of a legal issue in the sense of we might need to recontract or change our contracting practices. Yep. And to some extent, I've actually seen in some people that you and I've talked about, I've sort of seen a cultural shift. And one of the cultural shifts has been, we used to just roll Julian over. And it's actually forced me to sit down and go, well, hang on a minute, if Julian's now going to become a permanent employee, do I really want Julian to be a permanent employee? Is he up to scratch? So we've actually seen, I think we've seen a lot of work done, advisory, legal work done in terms of getting the contracting piece right and who's in, who's out. But then I think we've actually had some interesting conversations with clients around that cultural piece and, whether or not the habit actually allowed them to keep people in the universe who weren't really up to scratch.
I talked about addiction. Now you're talking about habits. I mean, there is something compulsive about using fixed-term employment as part of the model, and I think that's right. Once you start asking the question, do we really need to use this as a model? It brings in all other kinds of questions, which I am sure there are some, let's call them mavericks out there, who used fixed-term employment inappropriately as a model, basically to offset risk.
And if you're still out there doing that, give us a call and we'll try and sort you out.
Exactly.
We'll try and sort you out. Now, flexible work disputes, we thought we were going to be inundated.
So just the explainer. We need to go explainer first. So I've been banging this drum for many years. Section 65 in the Fair Work Act allows a large group of people, people with parental responsibility, people with disability, people over a certain age, to make flexible work requests to the employer. For a long time, that was what was called soft regulation because there was no ability to contest a decision. I want to work from home, Nigel. In the old days, Nigel will say, I've thought about it, I don't want you to work from home, I'm refusing your request, and I could do nothing. Nowadays, it is a contestable right. It is an enforceable, you can bring a dispute about it. The Fair Work Commission has the jurisdiction to hear disputes. They are hearing disputes. Some of the disputes that they have heard are very, very interesting, often in the context of working from home, which, as we know, is a huge issue, both culturally, socially, politically. What's interesting about my view or how we're seeing from the employer side is the conversation that we're having with employers when employers say, well, I've got this request, I'm going to refuse it. We have to say, and we do say, well, you're going to need a case, you're going to need some rationale, you're going to need data before you can refuse this because this employee can bring a dispute in the Fair Work Commission and you will be put to proof.
And I think the two things about that which we've probably seen employers do differently, I think we're seeing employers take requests more seriously now and to actually challenge themselves, well, can I accommodate this in some way? I actually do think that the overwhelming majority of good employers were doing that probably anyway, but I think we've seen an increase in that. But you are right. The other thing is we have seen more people contesting employer decisions, and so employers have had to get ready for defending their decision in a way perhaps they haven't done in the past.
It's the additional question that we will ask to a client, such as when they get a claim and then they say something like, well, we don't do part-time work here. And we have to say, well, why don't you do part-time work? Because that could be a problem, and it could be a problem at the commission. So it's an interest. I think there has been a change there. I don't think we've seen massive amounts of litigation. There's been a significant amount, but it's more about the approach.
Now, I'm just going to say, the last three were just sort of interesting comments. I won't go into too much detail, but the three things I've seen employers do probably consistently now for about 18 months is start taking industrial relations strategy more seriously. When I started my career back before they built Stonehenge, IR strategy was sort of right up there, and I suspect 15 years ago most businesses really weren't even talking about the notion of IR strategy. We spent a lot of time in the last year and a half actually with companies now talking about what is your strategy around union involvement, union relations, culture, frontline leadership, how do all of those pieces come together, instrument architecture. So it's been an interesting shift that it's kind of back. It's back.
Yeah.
I think we've had a lot of conversations with people about their workforce models, and that is, and we'll come on to this later on when we talk about same job, same pay, that's this issue of full-time, part-time, casual, labour hire, what do I subcontract, what don't I subcontract. That's actually been a big ticket item over the last year. And then lastly, which you and I have talked about a lot, I think people are starting, when they're involved in bargaining, they're starting to take bargaining strategy and bargaining architecture far more seriously than they have in the past. So I think the answer to that is what we've seen happen here is a lot of employers are refocusing in some of these areas, and they're re-resourcing in some of these areas than they probably did 2-3 years ago. And I think that's probably their takeaway at the moment. So, what have we already experienced and what have we learnt? In absolutely no order of priority.
Yeah, it looks like it's sequential because it's going down a road.
No, it's not. It's in no order of priority. Now, Right to Disconnect's gone into Modern Awards.
Correct, as it needed to,
It was required to. Did it go in a terribly offensive way?
Well, it depends who you ask.
But perhaps we should just start because there's still a misconception, isn't there?
A very good time to stop and pause.
There is still this misconception that the right to disconnect gives me the right to. It's unlawful to contact people at certain times.
And that you'd be jailed for
it. And you'll be jailed for it. All wrong. I've used the phrase, I think, when we did the first webcast on this. At certain points, certain people in certain contexts have a right to ignore your email or ignore your phone call or ignore the customer's phone call or the parent's phone call in the childcare centre. We're not talking about during work time, we're talking about outside work time. So it's I've always called it the right to ignore, limited right to ignore rather than the I'm going to Byron Bay for a week and you won't be seeing me.
And if you contact me, I'm going to
sue you and you're going to jail.
Yeah.
Went into the Modern Awards.
Look, in a relatively vanilla way, it went into the Modern Awards. I should put a marker down in the ground that there is a strong feeling within the union side of the bar table that right to disconnect should be different in different awards, in different industries, and I think we will see cases with quite specialised right to disconnect clauses in Modern Awards.
We've got the Clark case, which we'll talk about later on.
Yeah, I mean, a good example, or the easiest one that you can think of is for teachers and marking and doing things out of hours. They're on their time, but are they on their time because they're working marking student papers? Those kind of niche specific issues, I think we'll see them down the road. I mean, on right to disconnect more generally, there hasn't been a huge amount of disputation about it. I think from memory, the last count I did, there were four dispute applications that the Commission had heard, and there were 4 times that it had been mentioned in a general protections context.
It seems to get, if I'm running a general protections against you, I seem to maybe chuck it in for good measure.
But that hasn't happened that much, and I think it proves something that I've said probably on camera before. I mean, I think it's a solution to a problem that didn't exist.
Yes.
That's my view. Right to disconnect, the world hasn't ended.
Okay. Now, delegates' rights, obviously, again, there was for the first time in our history, we've actually got legislated rights for trade union delegates.
Correct.
And we've now got provisions that have gone into all of the Modern Awards in relation to delegates' rights. It should be said, a very quick explainer, this does not require you to have a union in your business. And even if a union is in your business, it doesn't require you to have somebody voted in or appointed as a union delegate. The delegate, of course, is first and foremost an employee of yours who also has the mantle of being the on-point person for that union in your business. I'll have to start by saying that separate to that, really, the delegates' rights clause in the awards attempts to explain what those rights are, their ability to communicate, what facilities they have access to. But very importantly, and I credit the Fair Work Commission for doing this because it really does need to be called out, the Fair Work Commission also included what might be said to be the contrary proposition, that is the things they can't do and the things they still had to do in doing their normal job, and credit to the Fair Work Commission for including that. And then of course there is provision for what we've historically called trade union training leave, which for people who have unions in their businesses already is very common fare and they understand it. So the delegates' rights clause go into the awards. Again, the world didn't end.
Well, speaking of common fare, I mean, I think the point we would make about what we've experienced and what we've learned is for industry, for businesses, for clients who already had union presidents, who already had delegates, who already had an enterprise agreement, it was entirely likely that a lot of this stuff has
Which is where most of the union activity is.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff was already sorted.
Yeah.
So this coming in over the top didn't necessarily change the game, as you mentioned, merely because the delegates' rights clause is in an award or exists in the Fair Work Act. It doesn't mean all of a sudden every workplace in Australia now has...
And it didn't change the right of entry laws for unions either, this particular... Now, having said all of that, some unions got grumpy.
Yes.
The electrical trades union, I think, the mining union...
The heavy hitters.
The heavy hitters got grumpy, and they didn't like the clause.
Yep.
They're in the federal court. Now, one of our colleagues is running the brief on behalf of the employers, Tamsin Lawrence from Victoria. I understand it's before the full federal court in 18 March, so real soon. Hopefully I've got that date right. Tamsin will scold me if I haven't. Essentially what some of the unions have said is they've drawn a very real technical point.
It's a very technical, legal federal court challenge. There are limits to what I would say about an ongoing federal court proceeding, but yeah, I think watch this space in terms of delegates' rights.
And I think there's two gists to the sort of the claim by the unions in the federal court. One is they're concerned that the way it's been framed, let's take a mine site. The delegate normally on the mine site possibly could be representing both the host employer's workforce and maybe even a labour hire workforce.
Working side by side.
Working side by side, and there's some dispute about whether or not the clause permits that and whether or not that's properly constructed and lawful. And I think the other thing they've criticised is they don't like the stuff I just gave the Fair Work Commission credit for, which is to say the delegate still has to perform their job and do all these things. They don't like that. So we'll look. Like Julian, I'm not going to sort of sit here and try and predict, but that's a case that's running on the 18th of March. We'll obviously keep you up to date with our alerts as to what happens, and good luck to Tamsin and the team who are taking that on in the federal court in defence. Where do you want to go next on the road? Do you want to pick one, or?
Oh, look.
You're going to go bottom right?
We can do that.
Same job, same pay.
Same job, same pay.
Same job, same pay. Again, I want most people to think about, quick explainer again. This is essentially, I use a labour hire company. I have an enterprise agreement in my business. I pay them a lot less than I pay my people. They're doing exactly the same work. A lot of applications. So the reason why I've got my folder here is I didn't want to fall short of getting the data right, but the mining union has made over 50 applications.
Okay.
There's been a Qantas case as well for short haul flight attendants who were labour hire employees. Very simply put, to date, on every occasion when there's been a case, the employers have rolled over. Can I say this? You're going to hate me saying
no, not at all. I was going to say I don't think that's many applications. I think that's a low amount of applications.
There's more to come. There's a lot more to come.
What I was going to say is, and I think we've said this before on Same Job, Same Pay, this particular part of the law was not aimed at ensuring that some random person, Billy, gets paid the same as Jane.
As Jane.
In some random job site somewhere else and I saw the advertisements. It wasn't about that. It was very targeted, and basically I think what we've said before is you know that this is coming for you because you have a model which has these arrangements and probably has been subject to union complaint or bargaining or whatever
for a very long time.
So I would be very surprised if any of those 50...
They all knew it was coming.
They all knew it was coming, which gets me to the rollover point. This is why I think these things are going in this way, in that in some respects they knew it was coming, they've planned for it, and then they go.
And the insight I think I'd offer you, because I'll be very careful, but we're dealing with some clients on some of these. The one thing I would say is if you think this is coming, it's better to have a chat with us about how proactive you are rather than waiting for the application. because if you actually are proactive, you might just achieve some level of flexibility within the legal framework that other people who sit back and just get hit by an application don't achieve. So if you think this is something that might come at you, please come and chat early. Lewis Itzo's been working on this with a number of clients at the moment. He's really up to speed with it. Come and talk to us now about a proactive strategy rather than a wait till you get hit by the application. It's really important.
The other thing I should say, based on these numbers, is obviously they're going to knock off the easy ones first. The more ambitious cases will be coming, and those will be the ones where there will be
some
contest, grey, and you'll need some good advice.
Now, we might just talk a little bit about multi-employer bargaining because obviously it was a largely new phenomena in terms of the way the Fair Work Act operated. We effectively had two streams of multi-employer bargaining: the supported stream, which in theory was for people who historically hadn't bargained, lower paid employees, people who didn't have the resources to bargain, and then this stream, which I always hate the name of, the single interest authorisation stream, which is really what you and I described as sort of like the general stream is probably the best way to describe it. Perhaps I'll do it fairly quickly. Obviously, the big case in supported bargaining, which took up a very large part of my life last year.
You know a bit about this subject,
a little bit about it. The Australian childcare industry, in unison with the United Workers Union first, and then other unions, and also in consultation with the government, obviously we're working on trying to secure a funding package to improve pay and conditions for people in the early childhood education industry. We took the lead on that with the Australian Childcare Alliance, unbelievably good organisation, one of the best industry organisations I've ever had to work with in my career. The president, Paul Mondo, worked very closely with me. They were the first cab off the rank in terms of the supported bargaining process. I'll probably just say a couple of things about how that panned out, because it's still we've now made a multi-employer agreement. We're now trying to join people up to it who want to join up to it. Made some interesting observations about what actually is or isn't low pay. So if you do find yourself in a supported bargaining dispute, some very interesting observations about what is or isn't low pay, which is one of the tests. One of the other tests is, do the employers have common interests? I'm going to come back to that because that's actually in the federal court as we speak, not related to the supported bargaining case, but another case we'll talk about. And very, very importantly, one of the very, very big employers in the industry, G8, who operate over 400 centres, joined that process. And the Commission was very anxious about actually joining them to it. And the proposition there was, well, surely you're big enough if you want to bargain to look after yourself. I think the supported bargaining stream will be interesting. We're involved in a case at the moment. I won't be inappropriate to mention it, but we're involved in a case at the moment. I think some unions are going to start to try and use this because it's a slightly easier path than single interest. And I suspect we're about to have one or two cases where employers might be dragged into the supported bargaining stream that perhaps shouldn't be there. And there'll be some interesting decisions coming through probably in the next 4 or 5 months in this area. So we'll have more to report. We're preparing one case at the moment as we speak, which will be, I suspect it'll be a bit of a test case in terms of big employers being dragged purportedly into supported bargaining.
The observation I was going to make is the model of any form of multi-employee bargaining involves sort of an approval application stage,
yes,
then the bargaining.
Which in childcare, and remember everybody wanted to be there, took well over a year.
Yep. So you have the application, you get the approval, then you have the bargaining, then you have the voting, then you have, I think, the stage.
Then you make the agreement.
Then you have a group or people sort of getting interested. Oh, that looks quite good.
Can we join up?
Let's join up. And then you get the dragging.
Yeah.
The dragging. It's very interesting. I guess my observation as we go through that sequence, all of these things take a lot of time, which on the theme of today, how's it all gone? None of this multi-employer bargaining stuff has borne the fruit or have reached the end of the road. Even something that got in absolutely first cab off the rank, supported bargaining, that still hasn't fully formed. That hasn't finished.
Oh no. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we've Deputy President Hampton, as we speak, is hearing applications to join more people. There'll be more applications next month. The big takeaway about multi-employer bargaining is probably the observation you and I made very, very early on. And again, probably because of my vintage, going back to the days when you used to actually sit in a room and negotiate on behalf of an industry.
Yep.
Getting people in a room from different parts of the industry, I'm talking about the employers now, even when they want to be there, you learn very quickly that you don't necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of things. If you're in a room and you don't want to be there, seeing eye to eye is going to be very, very, very challenging, particularly if you spent the last 25 years deliberately charting a course not to be in the room with those people because they're commercial competitors. Yep. So you're right, it's not everything people, particularly on the union movement, probably thought it was going to be. Now, on the single interest stream, fascinating, because you want to get dragged into that. Again, you've got this common interest test, but you've got this fascinating rule about the businesses have to be reasonably comparable. If you employ more than 50 employees, you're assumed to be reasonably comparable unless you disprove it. In other words, you've got to rebut that presumption. And there's been this really fascinating decision. I normally don't do this on camera, but it's a biggie. It's a biggie. Shock horror, it's in the mining industry.
Ding dong.
Ding dong. Now, I'll be frank, it's not our case. We weren't involved in this one. It involves a series of mines and APESMA, which is the Association of Professional Engineers. Really interesting debate about what common interests were, and for the lawyers out there, lovely debate about what is an attribute versus an interest. Do the interests have to be related to the process of bargaining? Some really interesting findings on this, what constitutes a reasonably comparable business. In this case, they found common interests and reasonable comparability between some of the companies. And they actually said one of them actually doesn't have common interests and is not reasonably comparable. Again, this has gone to the full federal court. My understanding at the moment is, again, I think it's going to be on the 17th or 18th of March, so the full federal court's probably stacked a few of these up to knock them over, a bit like the High Court does sometimes.
Yep.
So stay tuned, because if it's possible that you're thinking about multi-employer bargaining, or it's possible that you're planning not to be part of it, again, this case will be important, so that'll be coming down the pipeline in March as well. And I'll just perhaps quickly knock off the other two, and then we'll get on to the stuff at the back, so I think we need enough time to quickly get through it. Intractable bargaining, we've been bargaining and bargaining and bargaining and bargaining. We want the Commission to intervene and arbitrate. All I'm going to say about that is there was a kind of fear that people would be forced into arbitrations when they didn't want it. I think it's still a work in progress. At the moment, there's been a few people who've been deemed to be to meet the test of intractable. It's an extraordinarily challenging test to meet. You really have got to have been at it for a very long time. You've got to have been conciliating with the Commission for a very long time. So I think there's more water under the bridge there. What we have seen, though, in that space is we've seen a lot of people in very difficult bargaining situations agreeing to allow the Commission to make a recommendation and living with the recommendation as an alternative. And we've had a number of clients that we've taken through that. And then lastly, I've just thrown up on the slide there, protected action, ballot order, conciliation. For those people involved in bargaining, if there is going to be protected industrial action, has to be this ballot taken. And there's been a rule that says before you actually have the ballot declared, you've got to have conciliation in the Commission. Actually proved to be a good thing for a lot of our clients. We thought it might be a kind of tick the box, thank you, go away. We've seen some members really roll their sleeves up and say, well, hang on a minute, before this gets silly and out of hand, let's see if we can broker some sort of arrangement. So again, probably turned out to be a good thing rather than a bad thing.
I've got positive feedback about that, so yeah.
Well, now we've got 20 minutes, so we're going to have to do this fairly quickly. What's in the works and what could impact you? I might grab a few if we can real quick, and then I might throw over to you.
Go for it.
Gender work value. We've just, you took one and I took one. Just run a series of cases last year about the new work value rules. I'm very particular about phrasing this. The cases were described as gender undervaluation cases, which I think somewhat distorted what they're really about. It's about work value and making sure your work value assessment is free from gender bias.
But that work value assessment, it's focused on feminised industries.
It is focused on feminised industries. So we've got, again, childcare. Childcare was up for bat. We had some health professionals.
Health professionals, SHADs.
Social community was up for bat. Full bench ultimately reserved last year. Decision expected, I understand, possibly end of March.
Okay.
Possibly into April. That's not secret knowledge. I think the President had indicated that in another proceeding. What does it all mean? Look, it means wages are going up in those sectors. There's no doubt about it. Now, whether or not in the long run we end up in this world where all feminised awards end up with the same rate, or whether or not there's going to be genuine work value differentiation, we will have to wait and see.
Because we started with aged care, and the story with aged care.
Well, we ran aged care for 3.5 years.
Then we have childcare, and we have health professionals, and we have SHADs. It will be something else after that. The question will be, is there a differentiation?
The real chance is going to be, and again, I'm not saying this is good or bad. It's just we'll probably end up in a world where female-dominated awards for, say, a Certificate 3 employee, trades qualification, are going to likely be paid considerably more than male-dominated awards. And I've told you this before, at some point, some blue-collar union is going to come along and say, shall we run a reverse gender case to try and get our male-dominated award back up to where the female-dominated award is? And it'll be interesting to see whether or not that plays out, but that'll be many years down the track. So let's leave that. We've just had a big review in the Fair Work Commission about what we call model terms that go into enterprise agreements, consultation clause, disputes clause, and individual flexibility arrangement clause. The big issue here is, at the moment, we're all okay.
Yeah, essentially they changed the author from the minister to the commission. And the Commission's clauses are relatively, pretty similar.
With two big moments in that decision. One big moment was their disputes procedure does involve arbitration, whereas some clauses over the years in enterprise agreements had consent arbitration. But more importantly than anything else, there was a long debate about what triggers consultation for major change in a business. For the last 30 years, the business had to have made a definite decision to oblige it to consult with its employees. Union movement was attempting to water that down so you start to consult a lot earlier. Massive employer pushback. It didn't get over the line this time. However, when they issued their decision, the Commission have said, we're going to have another look at this.
Yeah.
And we'll have a look at it later this year. So later this year, we'll be involved in what will probably end up being a very, very important case for employers, because as you and I have said over the years, if the test is really watered down to something like a proposal, the minute you propose major change, you have to start consulting. I reckon some of our clients will have a legal obligation to consult almost on a weekly basis, possibly about things they have no intention in the end to actually implement. It could be chaos.
Perpetual consultation. Remember, this is a model term, so this isn't compulsory, but this is the sort of default term at the end of it. Those people out there in bargaining world who gets agreements approved, you'll know what we're talking about. But very, very interesting.
Yeah. Look, I might knock off wage theft and then I'll let you do RTAG, and you can. Having spent the last few weeks with me, you can do RTAG. Obviously, we've now got criminalisation for wage theft coming in January.
Yep.
This is essentially, you have an obligation, you're aware of the obligation, and you're not complying with the obligation. That will be sufficient. That's a summary description. I think Tamsin and Lewis did the webcast on this last time. Excellent webcast. What we're starting to see now is a lot of employers were starting to do periodic wage audits last year and the year before. We're seeing a big surge in people coming to us saying, how do I do a triage audit? What's the best proportionality for me to do? So I think that more employers are now spending more money and time on preventative measures than not, because they're anxious about the possibility of this gaining a lot of momentum. I'm not, unless you're out there deliberately underpaying people, I'm not hugely panicked.
Yeah, well, see, we don't see that, or at least I don't see that, and that's the point I would make about this, is that the change that you're talking about, the audits and various things, it's a seriousness and intensity that businesses are taking to wage compliance, which is renewed. We just do not see that people knew that they were in breach and continued to do that. I don't think it grips in that way.
The one thing I will say, and this big takeaway, we're working with a lot of clients at the moment in the space, is if you do a wage audit and you find a problem, the one thing you can't do, having done that, is then sit on your hands for 5 or 6 months before you fix it. There's going to have to be some real immediacy to the resolution of that issue. Otherwise, you could be leaving yourself exposed to the trigger should somebody actually take an action against you.
In fairness, I think that's the point of the legislation, to try and ring the bell, to try and make people put that important marker on their emails on this, and to resolve things quickly if there are things.
Now, RTAG sounds like something most people don't ever need to bother about.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting you say that. The RTAG it is currently constituted and is liaising
Road
with
Transport Advisory Group.
That's right, and it has subcommittees.
Which we're sitting on.
Which we individually sit on. Now, the purpose of all of this, and the reason why these acronyms exist, is because the Fair Work Commission are now in the game of regulating contractors.
Independent contractors of a type.
And probably the most sort of newsworthy ones are the gig workers.
So this is the person on the motorbike delivering me my hamburger?
Correct.
Yep.
Probably less prominent, but definitely as important, are what has been, I know you love this phrase,
I hate this phrase.
Last mile delivery.
It's an American phrase.
So this is courier work.
Courier work.
Parcel
deliveries.
Correct. Again, these people aren't employees, and those people watching will have heard about these debates about whether employees are independent contractors and so forth.
Doesn't matter anymore because the Commission's got the power.
Exactly, to regulate this part of the workforce, minimum conditions, termination rights and so forth. So the RTAG is currently engaging with not only the members of the subcommittee, but the broader industry players in this, and we're talking about gig platforms, we're talking about transport companies, we're talking about courier companies, and they are developing discussions, let's call them, around what these minimum conditions might be.
They're exploring options for creating minimum standards of a form, and again, the legal form might be debated later on, but of a form for gig delivery employees, couriers. Now, for you and I who've worked in the New South Wales jurisdiction, Chapter 6, which we've got up there for many, 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 many years, and having been co-authors of the book on all of this, this is
good bookstores everywhere.
Good bookstores everywhere. This is not foreign territory for us, but obviously for people who've never lived in our world, it does appear a bit foreign. But at the moment, we're in this consultation phase.
And I might just say, for those people who don't own a platform or who don't own a courier company, you might say, well, okay, maybe my coffee is going to be more expensive if I get it delivered, or my burger, or whatever. I think it is a little bit broader than that, particularly in the contractual chain aspect
Number
of it.
six.
Number six. There we go.
Number 6. So the tribunal's also got the power now to regulate supply chains that terminate in drivers. Let's use the word drivers at the end. So, Woolworths to Toll to Smith's Transport down to little Bob the driver. There's currently a claim by the Transport Workers Union to oblige all participants in all supply chains in this country to pay each other on 30 days of the performance of work. Now, that's a dramatic proposition. Now, forget for a minute whether or not the Commission ultimately will have the power to deal with all that. But if you think about it, Coca-Cola engaging a transport company to move their product around, do they pay them in 30 days? A concrete company working for a large construction company, does the construction company pay the concrete company in 30 days? So this isn't just anymore about the the driver getting paid in 30 days. This is about sequentially everybody in the chain getting paid in 30 days. So please, if you think this is just not about you, some of this stuff really could be about you, be you a manufacturing company or whatever you might be. We're sending out regular alerts on what's happening with this. Please stay up to date. And if you have views, you have an interest, you want to find out whether or not it relates to you, please come back to Julie and I and let us know, because it's really, really important. Jules, 9 minutes really quick. Junior rates on the chopping block again.
Yes.
This is your case?
It is my case. There is an application to substantially increase or just remove the incentive that employers have to employ juniors. There's
which awards?
Retail, pharmacy and fast food.
So big item.
Big item, particularly for the employment of juniors, people 18 or under. It is being heard later this year. We're in the preparation stage of evidence, and I'm going to talk right down the camera now.
Please help.
If you employ someone who's 18 or younger and you employ them under one of those awards, retail, fast food, pharmacy, please contact us because it is a very important case. I'm a big fan of junior employment because I think it is giving young Australians...
I started as one.
their first gig is very, very important, not just for their moment as an 18 or 17 or 16-year-old, but for the remainder of their lives. It's really important, and the Commission will thank you if you can assist. Please contact me, that would be great, and please contact me soon, please. Working from home clerks, this is another sort of, I guess, building case, Nigel, that we're going to hear later this year?
I was trying to work out who's got it in our firm. I thought it might be Lewis, but I also thought it might be you. I wasn't really sure.
No, it's Izzo.
Is it? Lewis has got this. So this is so I shouldn't say it's an application. This is the Commission bringing on of its own motion a consideration as to whether or not provisions of the Clerks Award have to be changed in relation to the notion of working from home. Case is in its early stages.
And maybe I might just set you up. The reason why this case exists is because we had a modern award review last year, and everyone said, in relation to what the awards are and what they do, they are not built for working from home. Employers are saying...
Employers as well.
Employers are saying...
You're right. If I am going to let you work from home, and you elect to work at night after the kiddies have gone to sleep, why would I be compelled to pay you night shift if you're making that election?
If you're going to work for 20 minutes between gym sessions, why would I need to pay you a 3-hour minimum engagement?
Yeah, so we should be careful here in the sense of, I think everybody's got a dog in the fight in a way in this issue. The Commission's at a stage now where it's commissioning some independent research. It's actually going to send the research out to employees, and it's also going to send the research out to employers. There is opportunity, I think, at the moment to comment on the questions they posed in the research.
Yep.
We'll be having a chat with Lewis. I think the questions are pretty good, but perhaps there's one or two that need to be looked at. But please, if you are employing people under the Clerks Award, please stay tuned to that. Also, I suspect that this might set a standard for some other awards.
Absolutely.
So during this year, this will be a big ticket item. And look, I'm going to go to the bottom, and then we'll probably talk about our Love Child Chapter 6. There is, you might recall, you should probably do recall, we had a lot of activity about 5 or 6 years ago now, hopefully I've got that right, about putting annualised salary provisions in modern awards. And there is this relatively convoluted process if you use the modern award process as opposed to a common law process, which is still available. If you use the modern award process, there's this sort of convoluted reconciliation process you've got to go through. I think it's I'm going to say 12 or 13 weeks. It's somewhere around that.
Complicated.
It's very
the clause
complicated.
goes for 5 pages.
And we had a lot of people come to us in the clerical world and also in the banking world. Clients came to us in the banking world and said, look, this is just unworkable for us. We've put on a case. We're agitating the case. Again, this came out of this was part of the award review process.
It's been cooking for a long time.
It's been cooking for a while. And it probably leverages a little bit off that funky thing we did with the restaurant award.
Possibly.
During COVID, where we did something like this. But the general proposition is, look, that's all too hard. How about we just pay certain people well over the award rate? And we're talking... Lewis is running this case. We're talking about 155% over the award rate. And if we pay 155% over the award rate, let's not worry about overtime or shift penalties or whatever. That case is going to be run this year. Again, watch that space because that'll be an important test case as well. We're not quite getting the support we thought we'd get from some of the other employer groups. They're coming in at, shall we say, at a discounted proposition to us. We've done the maths and we think the maths is right and it's quite compelling. But that'll be an important case as well because going by way of an exemption rate is a hell of a lot easier administratively than going by way.
It's a set and forget. And we are not talking...
And with wage theft, it's really important.
It is really important, and we are talking, as you say, about well over the award rate, and the maths should work. That's how the case is going to run.
And then perhaps just lastly, for the people online who are in the transport sector proper, in New South Wales, Chapter 6 has been regulating independent contract drivers now for the best part of 40 years, perhaps a little longer actually. I should stop forgetting how old I am. For over 40 years, New South Wales government's just put a bill on the table. We're working constructively to try and work through that bill at the moment. I'll be frank, we've been working with the Transport Workers Union to work constructively to reach an outcome in relation to that bill. Capturing the gig economy, all of those things, rideshare, really trying to keep Chapter 6 alive with the federal jurisdiction, but also introducing a number of interesting changes to how owner-drivers are regulated in New South Wales. So if you happen to be one of those niche people where this is important to you, please read our alerts on it, and if need be, give me a call personally or send me an email personally. Or if you want to drop Julie an email, but that's alive. You and I were working on that yesterday. We're working on it again today. That's quite alive and quite could. I hate to say fundamentally change regulation in New South Wales, but
I think that's fair.
That's fair.
That's fair.
That's fair. Fundamentally change regulation in New South Wales. So look, a lot in the works. Depending on what industry you're in, some of it is going to be directly relevant. I suspect as we go through this year, the definite decision consultation case will be a big case and have ramifications all over the place. The RTAG supply chain issue could wake up and really bite you commercially, depending on where that ends up. I've got no doubt that the Clerks Working From Home case will have resonance. And there's no doubt that the junior rates case is going to be hugely important for people who really do believe in affordable junior employment.
And I have to say, just returning to where we came from, I don't see the result of the election changing any of this stuff.
No. It's interesting. I mean, some people we've talked to, I think the best phrase to say is they're hoping it will. But at the moment, I'd really encourage you to think that this is the world we're in. And as we started the conversation this morning, please be focused on the world we're in, understand what it means for you. If that means you need to change your workforce mix, if it means you need to start to develop a more strategic understanding of what you are doing in the workplace, more holistically in terms of your culture, your leadership, your employment regulation, I think that's the forewarning that we're offering you today, is really start to take this seriously, be focused, and start to get prepared for the world we're living in and possibly could be living in for the years to come.
Particularly in the bargaining space, you're going to need a sophisticated offering.
And you're going to make a pitch?
And I can tell you, Nigel, what I'd like everyone to do is there is a link to enterprise bargaining training. It can be found in the handouts tab of your screens or later on our website. That's your baby, Nigel.
That's my baby.
You're very good at bargaining and various things to do with bargaining. If any of this has been of interest, if you're in the bargaining game, as Nigel has said, more is required of you in the current environment.
Come along.
It's very good fun.
It's very good fun. And also, if you really do want to pick up on some of the things we've been talking about, particularly flexible work requests, delegates' rights, union right of entry, our toolkits are available for people to pick up as well. Now that happened really fast. I thought we'd get to some questions, but I apologise that we didn't. Jules, thanks.
Thank you, Nigel.
We'll come back later in the year and we'll see whether or not we were right or wrong or how we've gone. Please, as I said at the opening, if you are impacted by the cyclone, please really stay safe, and I do hope your business gets through it. If anything today has piqued your interest and you want to have a chat, please contact Julian or I, or the firm generally on our general info line or our email address. We'd be more than happy to come back to you. Hopefully today was of some reflective value for everybody out there.
It was fun for me.
It was fun for you. It was very much fun for me too. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.